So Hare Krishna, welcome you all for this Vedanta Syamantaka study. So we have been doing from past 4 sessions we had till now. So there are several topics that we covered, which basically serve the purpose as an introduction to this text itself. Yeah, I'll change. Yeah, so that's planned. So just to give a brief overview of what all we have discussed till now. So we saw, this is a Vedantic study, it's Vedanta Syamantaka. So we discussed why we have to study Vedanta and why it is important for us to study Vedanta. It's not an optional study. Irrespective of which type of inclination we have, whether we have Brahmaical inclination or Vaishya inclination or Shudra inclination, we have to understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and that way we will be able to prosecute our devotional service, perform devotional service nicely. Okay. So this is what is given in Srila Prabhupada's books also, and we are discussing this work Vedanta Syamantaka, which was given to us by Srila Radha Damodar Goswami, the spiritual master of Srila Baladeva Vidyabhusana. And this is a bit technical in nature, but it consists of the same philosophy that Srila Prabhupada speaks of in his books. So we are taking the framework of Vedanta Syamantaka to understand the Krishna conscious philosophy, and will be taking lots of help in the form of references and quotes from Srila Prabhupada's work, and also from the works of our acharyas. Being technical in nature, some of these aspects are a bit more elaborately described by our acharyas, specifically Srila Baladeva Vidyabhusana, Srila Jiva Goswami. So we'll be looking into their works also. So we saw why Vedanta study is important. Then we saw how purpose of Vedanta is actually not Advaitavad or Mayavad. And we saw how the frame of mind should be while approaching the Vedantic study, so that a samanvaya can be made, a coherent presentation can be made of the entire Vedic literatures as presented to us by Srila Vyasadeva. So Vyasadeva did not present the Upanishads, or he did not compile the Vedanta Sutra for the Advaita crowd. Okay, it is not meant for Advaita crowd, it's meant for the Vaishnavas, for the devotees who can make progress in pure devotional service. So Vedanta is actually a study of Upanishads, but it is not related to Advaitavad at all. So we have seen several quotes, several references, and over a course of our 4-session discussions, we have refuted, or we have tried to refute some of the arguments of Advaitavad, but this will be more prominently appearing in the chapter 2 and chapter 3 of this work. We will be discussing chapter 1 today. So that was that, and then we also saw what is the actual purpose of Vedanta. We saw several quotes where Srila Prabhupada mentions that the purpose of Vedantic study is to actually chant the holy names of the Lord without any offenses, pure devotional service. So that is the purpose of Vedanta. How we can understand Vedanta, that also we discussed several quotes. Then how pure devotional service is the goal of all Vedantic study. Then we saw the introduction to the text. So this text basically deals with 5 topics. It's Ishvara, Jiva, then Prakriti, Kala and Karma. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that very specifically in his introduction to Bhagavad Gita. And this is also mentioned by our acharyas. So it's there in Govinda Bhashya. Srila Baladeva Vidyabhusana mentions, again in Gita Bhushan also he mentions that. And in the Ishoparishad commentary by Baladeva Vidyabhusana also it mentions that. So we also saw the summary of the contents. So first is going to talk about the Pramanas, how we can understand the absolute truth, what all evidences are there, what all proofs we can use, which text should be used, how the knowledge should be gained about the absolute truth. The analysis of these aspects is given in the first ray, that is the first kiran. So that's the first chapter. Second chapter speaks about Ishvara, his nature and other things. Third is about Jiva. Fourth is Prakriti. Fifth is Kala, and finally sixth one is Karma. Right. So we also saw which all topics will be covered in that. So this is a brief introduction of what all we have done till now. Now last class we stopped here where we were looking at the references where these 5 topics or tattvas are mentioned, which basically form the backbone of Vedanta philosophy. Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala and Karma. So Baladeva Vidyabhusana in his Ishoparishad commentary, he gives a little bit more elaboration on what this topic mean to us, how it should be studied. So he writes, there are 5 tattvas mentioned in the scriptures: Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala and Karma. Among them, Ishvara is the Lord, unaffected by time and place. He is the supreme conscious entity, Vibhu Chaitanya, and the Jiva is the minute conscious entity, Anu Chaitanya. The Jiva and Ishvara are both endowed with qualities such as eternal knowledge and an identity of I. Jiva and Ishvara are knowers of self and other things and also knowledge itself. This is not a contradictory state, but rather it is just like the sun, which illuminates itself and other things and which is also light itself. So what we are discussing here is that of these 5 tattvas, 2 are conscious, Ishvara and Jiva, whereas the rest 3, Prakriti, Kala and Karma, do not possess consciousness. There are controllers who have consciousness, who control these aspects, but consciousness is possessed by the supreme living entity Krishna and the minute living entity Vibhu Chaitanya and Anu Chaitanya, the Jiva. And it said Jiva and Ishvara are both endowed with qualities such as eternal knowledge and an identity of I. And Jiva and Ishvara are knowers and also knowledge itself. Now this concept we will explore in detail when we come to the second chapter, that's Ishvara. There this concept of Vishesha will be explained, means assigning adjectives to a personality whose inherent nature itself is that quality. So right now we will not discuss much on that, but this will be explained when we come to the second chapter. Srila Baladeva Vidyabhusana continues, he says, but the Lord, by nature endowed with all powers, enters into Prakriti and controls it and supplies material enjoyment and liberation to the Jiva. Though one, he appears in many forms, and though non-different from his body and qualities, he appears as a person with qualities or as a soul with a body to the qualified person. So this again, it's just an elaboration of this concept of Vishesha. We will see that in detail later. He is unavailable to the mind and senses, but controlled by devotion, and thus he offers his form of bliss and knowledge to the devotee. So this is about Ishvara. The Jivas, however, are not one but many. So Supreme Lord Ishvara is only one. Ekale Ishwar Krishna. There is only one Ishvara. There are other Ishvaras also, but when we are speaking about Ishvara with respect to Vedanta Syamantaka, it's Sarveshvara, who is the controller of all the controllers, the cause of all causes. So he is only one. So there are, in Hindu thought, it's prevalent that pantheism is there. So there's this plethora of gods. There are 33 crore devatas, and one can choose any form or any deity, and then that represents the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Person for the person who has chosen that, and one can worship like this. So this is also the concept that Shankaracharya propagated. He limited it to 5 deities called as the Panchopasana, and he said you can worship any of these deities because all these deities actually are representation of the absolute truth of Brahman, the undivided impersonal Brahman. Then the Jivas, however, are not one but many, in many differing conditions. By rejection of the Lord, they are bound by samsara, but by being favorable towards the Lord, the Jivas give up the coverings on their form and qualities and attain their true form and qualities. So this coverings on their form and qualities is the material covering, which gives a material form and material qualities made up of the 3 modes of material nature. And when they give up, when they are being favorable to the Lord, then they attain their true form and qualities. Prakriti is a state of equilibrium of the 3 modes. It is called by names such as Maya and Tamaha. Only when the Lord glances upon Prakriti does it give rise to variety in the universe. Kala is a special ingredient which arranges for experience of past, present, future, simultaneity, fast and slow. For a moment, to a parardha, there are many divisions of time. It revolves continuously like a wheel. It appears for the purpose of creation and destruction. So the specific aspects of Kala is explained in Mahabharata, in the Adi Parva, and also in Srimad Bhagavatam. So we'll take references from that. A parardha means half day of Brahma, 12 hours of Brahma. Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala are eternal ingredients without creation or destruction, but Jiva, Prakriti and Kala are dependent on Ishvara. The karma of the jiva is also called adrishta or fate. It has no independent power and is inert like prakriti and kala. It has no beginning but is liable to have an end, unlike prakriti and kala. So prakriti and kala, they are eternal. Although they are unconscious, still they are eternal. They are eternal energies of the Lord. So they do not start at a time and end at a time. Whereas the karma of a living entity, although it's called as beginningless, we will see why it is called beginningless, but it has an end. It can come to an end. Jiva, Prakriti, Kala and Karma are the energies, Shakti of Brahman, Shaktiman, and thus they are considered non-different from it. In that sense, there is agreement with the Advaita doctrine, which says that there is only Brahman and nothing else. To define these 5 items clearly, the Acharya among the Shrutis of Ishopanishad is presented. Right? So how the energies are non-different from it, from the Supreme Lord. Now, this Srila Prabhupada explains in his purports. This is the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva, and we will also be seeing this in detail. Now, I have also added a reference here of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Canto 1, Chapter 7, text 4 to 7. Now, this is an interesting verse. Actually, Srila Jiva Goswami in his Tattva Sandarbha, he says that there are 2 places where the essence of entire Bhagavatam is explained. Okay. So, one is the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam, which is in 2nd Canto, Chapter 9, text 33 to 36. So, these 4 verses, this Chaturshloki Bhagavatam is the essence, or it's the Bhagavatam in compact form, in essence form. And when the concepts of these 4 shlokas are expanded and elaborated, then we can derive all the philosophical understanding of what Srimad Bhagavatam presents. So, which basically means that the Chaturshloki is actually a kind of a very concise and terse commentary on the Vedanta Sutras, considering that Srimad Bhagavatam itself is a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, a natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra. But Srila Jiva Goswami, he says there is another place where the essence of Bhagavatam is mentioned, and the condition or the philosophy with respect to Ishvara, Jiva and Kala and Karma and Prakriti is being mentioned here. So this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 7, text 4. The verse goes, Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pranihite Male Apashyat Purusham Purnam Mayam Chatat Apashrayam. So the context is that Vyasadeva is unsatisfied with the work that he has done till now, till this point, before compiling Srimad Bhagavatam. So he has compiled Mahabharata and Vedanta Sutra. And at that time, Narad Muni comes and he gives him instruction that because you have not exclusively glorified the pastimes and activities and the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is why you are feeling morose. And he instructs Srila Vyasadeva to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead so that he can compile this work, Srimad Bhagavatam, which is exclusively mentioning about the Supreme Lord and his pastimes. So when Srila Vyasadeva meditated on the Supreme Lord, this is what he could see. So this is his vision. So Bhagavatam, we can say Bhagavatam appeared into Srila Vyasadeva's meditation in this form, and this is an elaboration. And Srila Vyasadeva, with understanding of this meditation, he compiled the entire Bhagavatam. So Srila Jiva Goswami says that these 2 verses, 1.7.4 and 1.7.5, basically is what Srila Vyasadeva saw, and he also saw what should be performed or what should be done so that the ultimate goal of life can be achieved, so that absolute truth can be achieved. So therefore, this is also a compact form of Srimad Bhagavatam, and one who has perfect understanding of the principles which are mentioned in these 2-3 verses will be able to understand Bhagavatam perfectly. And if we see here, these 5 concepts are actually mentioned in these 2-3 verses. The Kala aspect is not mentioned explicitly, but we can understand from the context of these verses itself. So see, the translation goes, thus he fixed his mind perfectly engaging it by linking it in devotional service, Bhakti Yoga, without any tinge of materialism. And thus he saw the absolute personality of Godhead along with his external energy, which was under full control. So which 2 aspects are being spoken about here? Srila Vyasadeva saw the Ishvara, the absolute personality of Godhead, the Sarveshvara, the supreme personality of Godhead, along with his external energy, which is Prakriti. And he also saw the activities. The absolute personality of Godhead is basically controlling the external energy. So he is Ishvara. Then the next verse goes, Yaya sammohito jiva atmanam trigunatmakam paropi manute nartham tat kritam jabhipadyate. Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. So, how does the external energy work? It works under the control of the absolute personality of Godhead, that is Prakriti. So, we have Ishvara and Prakriti. And then in the second verse, the living entity is being introduced. Yaya sammohito jiva. So, that's the third principle. And what is the living entity doing in this material world? Under the modes of the three modes of material nature, he is sammohito. He thinks of himself as a material product, although he is transcendental. Right? So in these two verses, so many different aspects of the nature and the capabilities of different tattvas are very nicely mentioned. So this external energy, which is under the control of the absolute personality of Godhead, that the same external energy is controlling the living entity. Correct? Because under the influence, due to this external energy, the living entity, what is the actual nature of the living entity? He is transcendental. But due to this external energy, he is under the three modes of material nature. And how does the living entity behaves? When he is under the three modes of material nature, he thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. So these reactions is your karma. So we see, this Ishvara, so the nature of Ishvara is mentioned, is the absolute personality of Godhead, who is the controller of the material energy. Then there is Jiva, who is also transcendental, but under the influence of the external energy, he thinks of himself as the material product. And what is the consequent action, consequent reaction for that? He is suffering the karmic reactions because of that. Now, how this material energy comes into, this external energy transforms into the three modes of material nature by the presence of Kala, which is actually not explicitly mentioned here. But we see inherently the three modes of material nature actually manifest only when the Supreme Lord injects the time potency into this external energy, which is also called Pradhana in its unmanifested state. So these two verses basically are speaking in a very nice nutshell the entire philosophy of Bhagavatam. Then, okay, how can the living entity come out of it? Anarthopashavam sakshat bhakti yogam adhokshaje lokasya janato vidvams chakre satvata samhitam. The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the supreme truth. So how can the material miseries of the living entity be directly mitigated? How can karma be reduced to zero, right? It can be negated, it can be completely wiped out. Because we saw, of these five tattvas, karma is the only thing which is not permanent, which has an end. So how it can be done? By linking process of devotional service. Yasyam vaishruyamanayam krishne paramapurushe bhaktir utpadite pumsa shokamoha bhayapaha. Simply by once giving oral reception to this Vedic literature, the feeling for loving devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion and fearfulness. So, by giving oral reception to this Vedic literature, just by hearing the concepts, the philosophy which is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of the Lord, which is mentioned in this work, then the feeling of loving devotional service, it sprouts up. And it extinguishes the fire of lamentation, illusion and fearfulness. So this is what one is supposed to do. And we also saw in the previous session that in the introduction to this work, or at the end of this work, actually Srila Radha Damodar Goswami mentions that one who studies and understands the concepts of this Vedanta Syamantaka, he attains to loving devotional service onto Lord Hari. So whatever we are discussing here is in essence the concepts which are explained in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's in the framework of this Vedanta Syamantaka. So we are not doing something different or very obscure scripture, we are not studying that, we are studying what is the proper and perfect Krishna conscious philosophy. Right? So we'll enter into the first ray, that is ascertaining the nature of the Supreme Lord of all. Yeah, so this is first is actually about Pramanas. So now this is the actual work start of this work. So Radha Damodar Goswami in his Mangalacarana he writes Sanatanam Ruhapam Ihyopa Darshayan Anand Siddhum Paritah Pravardhayan Antas Tamastoma Harachasa Rajatam Chaitanya Rupo Vitur Adbhutodayah. Now there are two ways in which this verse can be interpreted. Okay, one is actually speaking about Krishna's Leela, and the second interpretation is speaking about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. Okay, and both makes quite good sense with respect to this verse. So first interpretation goes, exhibiting his eternal form in this world, right? Sanatanam Rupam, and increasing the ocean of bliss in all directions, Ananda Sindhum. The moon-like Lord Krishna, whose form is pure consciousness and whose appearance is wonderful, removes the darkness accumulated within the heart, may he shine forth. The Supreme Lord, he exhibits eternal form in this world, he increases the ocean of bliss in all directions. He is moon-like Lord Krishna, no? Stoma Haraha, it's mentioned, whose form is pure consciousness. Correct? Chaitanya Rupa, his form is pure consciousness, Chaitanya Rupa, whose appearance is wonderful, removes the darkness, right? Antastama, and accumulated within the heart. Harasa Rajatam, whose appearance is wonderful, and may he shine forth. Adbhutodaya. Adbhutodaya means wonderful, and may he shine forth, means he is Ihopa So this is talking about Krishna, and the understanding is that Srila Radha Damodar Goswami is invoking this verse because he is elaborating on the instructions of Lord Krishna, and he came to remove the darkness accumulated within the heart. And with respect to this particular work, the darkness is the misunderstanding or non-understanding of these five principles. Now, second interpretation goes, instructing Rupa and Sanatan and propagating in all directions the ocean of knowledge received from Madhvacharya. The moon-like Lord Chaitanya, whose one appearance is wonderful, removes the darkness accumulated within the heart, may he shine forth. Correct? So this, whose appearance is wonderful and whose appearance is wonderful, both of them refer to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So instructing Rupa and Sanatan. So this Sanatanam and Rupam refers to Sanatan Goswami and Rupa Goswami. And propagating all directions the ocean of knowledge received from Madhvacharya. So Ananda Sindhu. Now, Ananda refers to Ananda Tirtha, which is another name of Madhvacharya, and Ananda Sindhu means whatever Madhvacharya propagated. Correct? So these are the two verses. Now Srila Prabhupada in his preface to teachings of Lord Chaitanya, he writes that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and the teachings of Krishna, actually there is no difference between them. Correct? There is no difference between the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and teachings of Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also, when he is instructing Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, all his instruction all appear in verse form in Chaitanya Charitamrita. They can be also categorized into these five principles. The Lord demands that one surrender unto him by following these 6 guidelines, but the unintelligent so-called scholars of the world misunderstand these demands and urge general mass of people to reject them. So at the conclusion of the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna directly orders, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me alone and offer obeisances unto me. And by doing so, the Lord says one is sure to go to him in his transcendental abode. And what did Lord Chaitanya teach? He taught the direct worship of Lord Krishna. Correct? And then Srila Prabhupada gives a translation to this verse that Lord Chaitanya also taught that the place known as Vrindavan, I'm forgetting that verse, but this is a very famous verse just which Srinath Chakravarti Thakur he composed with respect to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance and his pastimes. So Srila Prabhupada writes, Krishna appeared as the foster child of King of Braja. Lord Chaitanya also taught that the place known as Vrindavan is as good as Lord Krishna because Lord Krishna being the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, there is no difference between him and his name, qualities, form, pastimes, entourage and paraphernalia. Lord Chaitanya also taught that the mode of worshipping the Lord in the highest perfection stage is the method practiced by the damsels of Braja. These damsels, gopis or cowherd girls, simply loved Krishna without any motive for material or spiritual gain. Lord Chaitanya also taught that Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless narration of transcendental knowledge and that the highest goal in human life is to develop unalloyed love for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And furthermore, Srila Prabhupada continues that Lord Chaitanya's teachings are also identical to those given by Lord Kapila, who propounded the original Sankhya Yoga. and he teaches the authorized system of yoga, which teaches meditation on the transcendental form of the Lord. And this is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that of all yogis, the greatest is the one who constantly thinks of the Lord within the core of his heart with love and devotion. So why are we discussing this? We are discussing this in context to this particular verse, because this verse can be understood in two ways. So when Srila Radha Damodar Goswami compiled it in such a way, now we do not know exactly what was his thought process, but the poetry is such that it can accommodate the teachings of Krishna and also the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And as Srila Prabhupada mentions here, there is actually no difference between these two. And also the transcendental meditation aspect, which Kapila Dev taught in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, also is included within that. On the basis of the Sankhya philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, which maintains that the Supreme Lord is simultaneously one with and different from his creation, Lord Chaitanya taught that the most practical way for the mass of people to practice Sankhya Yoga meditation is simply to chant the holy name of the Lord. He taught that the holy name of the Lord is the sound incarnation of the Lord, and that since the Lord is the absolute whole, there is no difference between his holy name and his transcendental form. Thus, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one can directly associate with the Supreme Lord by sound vibration. Right? Okay. So, normally, Acharyas, they give a couple of verses or 3 verses in their Mangalacarana. Srila Jiva Goswami gives around 7 verses in his Mangalacarana. But Radha Damodar Goswami gave only 1 verse here, and because it's a very short work, which is completely concentrated only on expounding on these 5 tattvas, so it directly goes into the subject matter of the first chapter. So this is about Pramana and Prameya. Now those of you who have done Bhakti Shastri, then this Vaishnava epistemology session was taken before the study of Ishopanishad, and this elaborate study of Pramana and Prameya was conducted at that time. So this section of Vedanta Syamantaka is a bit technical. Okay, so it might seem a bit stretched. So we have to pay. Now we will not be getting into too much intricate details, because lots of concepts from Nyaya text, from Vaisheshika text and other things have been mentioned here. But we will go through this because it has been given by our Acharya Radha Damodar Goswami. So we'll go through this and we'll try to see how he basically takes this concept of Pramana and Prameya and then establishes that the Shabda Pramana, and specifically the Shabda Pramana from the Vedic literatures, is actually the perfect Pramana for understanding the Supreme Absolute Truth. So this, again, as I said, it's not a new concept for those of us who have done Bhakti Shastra. And this is derived from Srila Jiva Goswami's Tattva Sandarbha. So Jiva Goswami in his, there has Pramana Khanda. So he has explained of the 63 Anuchedas in Tattva Sandarbha, I think the first 21 or 22 are actually speaking and elaborating only on this Pramana and Prameya Tattva. So he goes into quite an elaborate detail into all these things with respect to linguistics, which different types of philosophers, what do they speak, what the Buddhist way of Pramana is, what do the Nyayikas speak, what are the different types of Pramanas, why we should accept them, why we should reject them, why some of them is included in other types of Pramanas. So it's an exegesis, it's a huge essay, but everything is shortened in this work, and because it's understood that when we have, and Prabhupada makes it very simple actually. If you see in the introduction of Ishopanishad, Srila Prabhupada's first few paragraphs on the introduction itself, he says that there are 4 defects. Because of these 4 defects, the direct perception or Pratyaksha Pramana is not complete, or it's not enough to understand the absolute truth. And because our mind and intelligence is also affected by different types of illusory things, so therefore we cannot by inference understand the Supreme Lord. So Vedas are the actual Pramana through which we can understand the Supreme Lord. And within 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, he concludes that this is how the Vedas should be accepted. And from then on, he goes on explaining what the Vedic literatures actually explain. So this Prabhupada made very simple, and the understanding was that this intricate analysis of Pramana and Prameya, it is for the scholars. And Srila Prabhupada's books and his works are primarily meant for widespread expansion of this Krishna consciousness movement, so that people can take up pure devotional service. And it's also understood that in Kali Yuga, not many people will be actually interested in studying of this intricate details of Pramana and Prameya and technically analyzing. For them, they should have faith, they should surrender on to the Lord, they should follow the process and realize it for themselves. So that is the manner in which our Acharya has presented this. But if you see the context of why Radha Damodar Goswami is elaborating on these details, we have to go 500, 300, 400, 500 years back, where the scholarship within India, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, and even 100, 200 years back when Srila Baladeva Vidyabhusana was there was interest in studying into these different philosophies, into understanding what is Pramana, Prameya and all those intricate details. But now, with the spread of materialism, industrialization, this, that and all, people are not really interested and they do not have mental capacity also to understand all these things. But, so then why are we studying this? But then because Sri Radha Damodar Goswami gave us this, and it will make a proper sense to us as to what we are doing is actually not something out of sentiment. Now, when in modern context, when it is said that one has to have faith in the Vedic scriptures, or one has to have faith in God, and then one should do devotional service to Him, one should worship Him and all, it is always considered that it's a blind faith or blind belief. Right? What we are doing is actually fully based on faith. There is no rational basis to it. There is no proper understanding of it. There is no proper logic to it. So just through blind faith, we are just thinking that there is some God. It's an imagination within our mind, and we are doing some activities thinking that it will lead us to a better destination in our next life. But actually, these are all just useless. These are all just for some amount of mental peace. Now, when we think that we are the full controllers of everything around us, and then miserable things happen, we'll become more frustrated, because we understand then that actually we are not the controllers of our life. So now when something, some higher energy or some higher form is being, and we say, oh, this God who exists and we can depend upon Him, then even when there are some miserable situations, some difficult situations in our life, now we will be able to imagine of that particular deity and we will be able to worship Him. That way we can pacify our mind. So this is not our philosophy. This is what the thought process of the modern people are, or those who think that those who are religious are actually fools, because they do not have any rational thought process. The atheists, they have this accusation against us, against all the theists, that we do not have any rational basis for what we are doing. We do not have any philosophical basis for what we are doing. We are doing just sentiment, and we do not know what we are doing, and this is only going to lead to nothing. Whatever is existing in this life, it is only for enjoyment, and we should do what we are supposed to do here, because they are completely resorting only to Pratyaksha Pramana and Anumana Pramana. And to some extent, we can say that they are actually justified in thinking like this, because other religions, with respect to Islam or Christianity, they do not give any philosophical basis for the explanation of their religious concepts. Okay, so when we will not be going into this detail, but just to give a brief introduction, when Christianity was started 2000 years back, or when Islam was started 1300 years back, they actually were not into philosophy at all. It was all religious, ritual based. This is what is supposed to be done. One should have faith in this particular deity, or one should have faith in this, in God, and then that is how it should go. But the philosophical basis of Christianity was actually given around 200 to 300 years later, after Christianity came into existence. And there was a necessity, because critical thinkers were coming up at that time. So Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, they all came up, and that time it was a necessity for this Christian theologians to give some philosophical basis also to Christianity. So they came up with concepts. It's basically speculated some concepts, and then from then on, they propagated that this is the philosophical basis. But there are so many problems in that, and they could not answer several questions which were asked by the materialists to them. So the conclusion that was brought against them is that it's all based on faith or belief, and there is no proper philosophical understanding of why such and such things are being followed and it is to be done. But the Vedic thought has always been one of not neglecting the intelligence of human beings, not denigrating the intelligence of human being, but to basically appreciate that intelligence is there, mental capacity is there, thinking process is there, feeling process is there, now there's mental capacity, this memory is there, and all these things can be utilized in understanding the way to approach the Supreme Lord and how we can convince ourselves and others into taking up this process. So that is Pramana and Prameya. So this is basically a process through which we convince the neophyte devotees can get conviction as to why they are doing what they are doing, and for those who are Madhyamas, who are preachers, for them it gives a very sound basis to convince others also as to what they are doing is actually proper and it makes sense. So we are not neglecting intelligence. So even Krishna also in Bhagavad Gita, he says, Jnanam Vijnanam Jnanam Teham Sa Vijnanam Idam Bhakshyam Sheshatah. So he says that I am giving you knowledge and realization. He says, so when we speak of scriptures, Bhagavad Gita is not a belief-based system, it's actually talking about knowledge and realization. So at several places, Krishna speaks about different types of knowledges, and he also says that once you have this particular knowledge, then you will be able to understand what actual transcendence is. So knowledge is actually mentioned. So knowledge itself means that one is using his intelligence to understand what is right and what is wrong. So knowledge is not neglected in Vedic literature. So that way it is different from all the other religions, where the primary focus on religion is sentiment based or belief based or faith based. Whereas for us it is based on understanding of Pramana, proper Prameya, what can be understood, what cannot be understood, and what is the proper way of approaching this entire Vedic process of study, to attain the highest perfection in life. So he writes, without evidence, Pramana, an object of knowledge, Prameya, cannot be proved. Therefore, the various kinds of evidences will be described first. Now, the meaning or the definition of this word Pramana and Prameya, we have to understand. Pramana is the instruments through which can be used to prove something, and that which is to be proved or that which is to be known is called as Prameya. So instruments which are used to give knowledge is Pramana, or the instruments which are employed to gain knowledge are Pramana, and what is to be known by those instruments of knowledge, that is called as Prameya. Okay, so we will see this commentary on Tattva Sandarbha. So it's mentioned Pramana as defined in the epistemology of Nyaya Darshana means Pramacarana, an instrument cause of valid knowledge. Now, this might seem a bit technical, but actually it's quite easy to understand. Now, Prama means valid knowledge. Okay, and what is valid knowledge? Valid knowledge is further defined as Yatharthanubhava, perception that agrees with reality. So both these statements come from Nyaya Bhasha, which is a Nyaya Darshan text. So we will discuss about this in a little bit detail so that the rest of the discussion of Pramana and Prameya becomes easy for us. Now, valid knowledge. Now, there can be two types of knowledge, correct? One is incorrect knowledge, and one can be correct knowledge or valid knowledge. So, we see that there are four things because of which we actually will not be able to attain valid knowledge. We will discuss that in detail. So, that perception, valid knowledge means that perception that agrees with reality. So what is reality? Now, reality is the concept of the perfect understanding of these five principles. Now, we discussed that. If we have perfect understanding of Ishvara, of Jiva, of Kala, Karma and Prakriti, then that is the perfect reality. So, Prama basically means the perception or our understanding which agrees with what actually is. For example, now we have this table, correct? Now, this table is made up of wood. So, is it real that the table is made up of wood? Yes, it is real that this table is made up of wood. And if we have this knowledge that this table is made up of wood, then it agrees with the reality of it. Now, if I think that this table is made up of plastic, right, I somehow feel that, okay, it is made up of plastic, it does not look like wood. So, what is the reality? The reality is that it is made up of wood, but then my perception is that it is actually made up of plastic. So, my perception does not agree with the reality, therefore, it is not valid knowledge. Right? So, valid knowledge is that which is Yatharthanubhava, or the perception that agrees with reality. So, whatever is real, what is real? If I have the same understanding of that reality, then my knowledge is valid. But if the reality is different and my understanding of that reality is different, then that is not valid knowledge. So Pramakarana basically means that an instrument or the methodology through which I can gain that valid knowledge, that is called as Pramana. Okay, so Pramana is basically the proof or the evidence or that instrument through which I can gain valid knowledge, and this valid knowledge is the perfect knowledge of the reality that is existing. And if the Pramana is actually not giving me valid knowledge, it is not giving perfect knowledge about reality, then that Pramana should be rejected. So this study that we are actually doing here is the study of the Pramanas, so that we can accept those instruments of knowledge which will give us perfect knowledge, and we will reject those instruments which will not give us perfect knowledge. So when we are speaking about Vedanta with context to Vedanta Syamantaka, or in fact with respect to the entire Krishna conscious process, we basically want to find out that Pramana which gives us the knowledge about the absolute truth, about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the premise. Okay, now what is the premise? Premise is, before the study of anything, there are some assumptions which have to be made. And without those assumptions, then we cannot approach anything. For example, the scientists also have their assumptions. Their assumption is that whatever knowledge is to be attained, we can attain it through our senses and through the extension of our senses. Right? So that is why they do not believe, or they do not have faith in the Vedic Shabda Pramana. They say whatever knowledge has to be attained, if I can see it, I can feel it, I can sense it, I can hear it, I can smell it, I will be able to attain knowledge about that. And because I have limitations, I can extend my sense perception by different instruments. If I want to see far away, then I can use a telescope. If I want to see something which is very small, I can use a microphone. If I have to hear some news which is being propagated in a different part of the world, I can use a radio, I can use a headphone to hear. So based upon the sense perception, I will be able to gain all my knowledge. So this is a basic premise. So this is an assumption on which the entire understanding of their scientific basis is made. Similarly, our premise with respect to Vedanta study is that absolute truth exists. There is a controller above us, and through proper understanding and analysis of the Pramanas, we will be able to know him. So this Srila Jiva Goswami explains in Tattva Sandarbha. He says that absolute truth exists, and our goal is to understand that absolute truth. And that is how Srila Vyasadeva also starts his Vedanta Sutra. He says, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Now because you have attained this human form of life, you have performed all your Vedic rituals and other things, now is the time for you to inquire about Brahman, about the Supreme Absolute Truth. And then the entire discussion goes. So this basic premise must be there. And we also discussed in the previous classes that to understand Bhagavad Gita properly, the basic premise is that one should at least have the theoretical understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And with that understanding, as the text moves, as Krishna explains concepts to Arjuna, it all falls into sense. It all makes sense. It all falls into proper places. So proper premise is actually required to come to a proper knowledge. So this is premise. So the premise for us is that there is the Supreme Absolute Truth, and we can know it through the proper understanding of Pramana. Correct. So that gives us proper knowledge. So perception that agrees with reality is the valid knowledge, and Pramana is basically the instrument which can give us that valid knowledge. So that valid knowledge here for us is the Supreme Absolute Truth, and we can know about the Supreme Absolute Truth through different types of Pramanas. So this is a discussion of the Pramanas and which Pramanas are actually perfect for understanding the Absolute Truth. So Vaishnava Acharyas accept the Nyaya theory of Pramana with some modifications, but the Nyaya theory is not the only one. Each school of thought in India has its own conception of Prama and Pramana, what true knowledge is, to what extent it can be achieved, and how. So each school of thought in India means basically the 6 schools of thought that we discussed in last class. We have this Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Patanjali's Yoga, then we have the atheist Kapila's Sankhya philosophy, then Uttar Mimamsa and Purva Mimamsa. So all of them have their own understanding of Prama or Pramana. Prama means valid knowledge. Pramana means the instrumental cause through which we can get valid knowledge. So, and Srila Jiva Goswami writes, this is commentary on Sandarbha, Tattva Sandarbha. So he writes, Sri Bhagavat Sandarbha aims at the highest kind of knowledge obtainable, personal realization of the absolute truth. In the present Anucheda, Sri Jiva Goswami emphatically asserts that for this lofty purpose, all Pramanas are unreliable in the hands of imperfect humans. Now, the Pramana, which is actually dependent on what we want to learn or what we want to gain knowledge about. Again, coming back to our example of this desk itself, to gain the knowledge of this desk, now some amount of knowledge of this desk I can gain by the Pratyaksha Pramana. Pratyaksha means when I use my senses to gain knowledge. So using my eyes, I can understand that it is black in color and there are orange design around this. Now by touch sensation, I can understand that it is strong, it is this much thick and it is made up of wood. Correct? And by also Pratyaksha Pramana, by my eyes itself, I can understand it has 4 legs and it has been made like this. There is a drawer also. And although I may not be seeing the nails which are there in this particular desk, but by Anuman Pramana, because I have previous experience that to make a structure like this, then I will have to have enforcements or joints so that this structure can stand on its own. So there are some nails or some injections which are provided inside this table. So that is why it is able to stand properly. So this is Pratyaksha Pramana. And Anuman Pramana is when I understand that there is some nails around it, which although I will not be able to see, but it is holding it proper. So this is Pratyaksha and Anuman. So to understand this desk, correct? Now through Pratyaksha and through Anuman, I have some basic understanding of this particular desk, correct? So for a general understanding of this table, only these two Pramanas should be enough. Now if I want to understand what type of wood has been used, where is this wood found? Is this wood made, or is this wood taken from the tree in Salem, or is it coming from Rajasthan? Is it coming from somewhere else? Now for that, just by looking at it, I will not be able to get that knowledge, correct? Just by my inference, I will not be able to gain that knowledge. So therefore, I have to inquire to somebody, I have to ask somebody to gain that knowledge, correct? I have to ask, who bought this desk, who made this desk? I have to go to that person and inquire from him to get more in-depth and detailed knowledge about this particular table, correct? Desk or table. I'm using both of them interchangeably. So depending upon what we want to know and how much we want to know, we can employ different types of pramana. Till now we have discussed 3 already. There is Pratyaksha, there is Anuman. Anuman means using logic or using inference to understand that something would be there. And Shabda is when we ask an authority and gain knowledge from that particular person. So these are the 3 ways in which we can gain some knowledge, and there are other ways also which we will see. So Sri Jiva Goswami, he continues and he writes that every person in this world tends to make 4 kinds of mistakes in perceptive judgment. Okay, before we get into this, the point which I was trying to conclude is that depending upon what we want to know, there are specific pramanas which can be employed. So if I want to know in kitchen if things are cooking properly or not, and if the pot is actually under fire, if the fire has been lit, I just have to go down and just have to see if the fire is there or not. So Pratyaksha Praman will suffice in that particular situation for me, correct? So I don't have to go to inference, or I don't have to take Shabda Pramana to understand if the pot has been kept under the stove or above the stove or not. It is there, the fire is there, it's burning, then I know that the thing which is there inside the pot will be cooked. So for that knowledge, to understand whether the pot has been placed properly or not, I just have to use Pratyaksha Pramana only. So I have gained the knowledge that the pot has been kept in a proper place. That's it. So if I want to know only that much, then only that Pramana is enough for me. So depending upon which Prameya or what the knowledge about which I actually want to gain, I can decide which Pramana to be used. So here in Bhagavat Sandarbha, we are talking about the highest kind of knowledge obtainable or personal realization of the absolute truth. And in the context of Vedanta Syamantaka also, we are talking about the actual nature of Ishvara, about Prakriti, about Kala, Karma and Jiva. And to understand these 5, is it enough if we use only Pratyaksha Pramana? Is it enough if we use Anuman Pramana or inference or logic? Are these Pramanas enough for me to give me the knowledge about the absolute truth or not? So this study is basically for that purpose. So, Sri Jiva Goswami says that there are 4 kinds of mistakes in perceptive judgment. There is Brahma, confusing one thing for another, as when one sees a tree at dusk and thinks it a man. So, Brahma is illusion. So, when one is in illusion. So, when one sees a tree in the dark, he might misconceive it as a man. So, that is an illusion. Pramada, inattentiveness due to a distracted mind, as when one fails to notice that someone close by is singing a song. Right? So, this is committing mistakes. So, one can commit mistakes. Vipralipsa, the desire to deceive others, as when a teacher conceals from his students something he knows. This is cheating tendency. And Karana Patava is weakness of the senses, as when a person, even with a focused mind, is unable to discern some object because of basically his senses are not perfect. Because of these natural faults, no mortal can be perfectly reasonable on his own strength, no matter how diligently he tries to err is human. So, Srila Prabhupada in his lectures and in his books, he mentions this. There are 4 imperfections within human being, within every living entity of this material world. There is a tendency to cheat, there is tendency to get illusion, there is tendency to commit mistakes, there is tendency to cheat, and then we have imperfect senses. So, with these 4 imperfections, Brahma, Pramada, Vipralipsa and Karana Patav, we will not be able to gain perfect knowledge. Correct? So, therefore, how can we gain that perfect knowledge? That is explained in Vedanta Syamantaka. The ordinary means of acquiring knowledge are especially inadequate for learning about the absolute truth, which is not a measurable thing of this world and which refuses to reveal itself to speculators and skeptics. A basic premise of spiritual science is that underlying all existence is a unity, an absolute truth, tattva, and that everything thus has definite cause and purposes. Human intelligence that ignores this premise remains poor. So, this is the premise for our Vedanta Syamantaka study. Although it comes under Jiva Goswami's Sattva Sandarbha, but this is what we are trying to do. Our basic premise of understanding the spiritual science is that underlying all existence is a unity, an absolute truth, and everything that has everything thus has definite causes and purposes. There is a cause and there is a purpose behind everything that is existing. We are purpose driven beings. Whatever we do in our life, we are meeting a purpose. Correct? So, therefore, there is a higher purpose also. And this is all basic Krishna conscious philosophy which Srila Prabhupada taught us. And human intelligence that ignores this premise remains poor. So, if we see, what does Srila Prabhupada teach? How do we go and speak to a person? We say that we are purpose driven beings. Whatever we do, even from basic act of breathing to eating, to take care of this body, to wearing of clothes, to going to specific places, to performing our activities, to make our body comfortable. There are so many activities that we do. Even when we sit like this because there is a purpose to be fulfilled. That is to make my body comfortable. When I am walking, there is a purpose to be fulfilled because I have to reach to a particular destination. I am breathing because I want to live. I am eating because I have to get energy. I am maintaining my body. I am taking bath because there are impurities which are there on my body which I have to clean. So, each and every aspect of our life basically has a purpose. But then, if we are taking care only of this body, then there is no difference between us and animals. But then we can also understand that there is a difference between animals and us because our activities are more refined. Our activities are aimed at some higher purpose. We do things sophisticatedly. We have intelligence which is higher than that of animals, which preempts that there is something which is higher. There is something which is higher which we should inquire about. Correct? Now, this is not something new that we are learning. This is what we know already based upon what Srila Prabhupada taught us and how we preach. So, therefore, the premise is set based upon the proper understanding of this human consciousness. This premise is that there is an absolute truth, there is a supreme controller, because I can understand I am not the supreme controller, I am not able to control so many things, and I am being subjected to different types of miseries. I am being subjected to adibhautik miseries, adhyatik miseries, adidevic miseries. There is birth, there is death, there is old age, this is, although I don't want to die, death comes. Although I don't want to become old, I want energy within my body so that I can do many things, but still old age comes, which basically suggests, although we do not know who that person is, but it suggests, it points to the direction that there is someone who is actually manipulating these things for me. So it preempts, it directs us to the conclusion that there is an absolute truth. There is someone who basically is orchestrating and managing all these things. Now, who that person is, that discussion will come later. But actually, to understand there is a person that we are being controlled by somebody is the start of the utilization of the human form of life. So the premise is not very difficult to understand. The premise is very simple. That to understand the spiritual science, we have to understand, the premise is that underlying all existence is a unity and absolute truth, and everything thus has a definite cause and purpose. And human intelligence that ignores this premise remains poor. So a human being who does not inquire into all these things, he lives his life just like an animal, and no purpose is achieved in his human form of life. So this is our premise for studying this Pramana. So our Prameya, we talked about Pramana and Prameya, and Prama is valid knowledge, Pramana is instrumental cause or the methodologies through which we can gain valid knowledge, and Prameya is what is that knowledge, what is the object of knowledge. When we gain knowledge, we are gaining knowledge about whom. About whom are we gaining knowledge? That is the Prameya. Okay. So we discussed this also, I think in the second class of this study, that there are three things. There is the knower, one who knows, there is knowledge itself, and then there is the object of knowledge. So knower is the one who is conscious, who actually gains knowledge, and the knowledge of that object itself, and then there is the object itself. So again, coming back to this table, there is this object. So this has some characteristics, and the knowledge of the characteristics of this desk is actually the knowledge. And then who is receiving it? I am receiving it. You are all receiving it. Right? We are understanding about this particular object of knowledge, and we gain knowledge about this particular object. So philosophically, it is defined into these three. So there is this knowledge, there is a knower of the knowledge, and then there is an object of knowledge. And Krishna also explains that in the 13th chapter. If I remember correctly, 13th, 14th, and I think 16th chapter also. No, 13th and 14th chapter, he explains this particular process. Kshetra, Kshetragya, then who is the controller of all, what is knowledge, Jnanam, Gyayam, all those concepts are actually not new. This has been explained in Bhagavad Gita by Krishna himself. So for us, Pramana and Prameya Pramana is the instrument through which we can understand or gain that knowledge. Now, I am the knower and I have to gain knowledge. So through what means do I gain knowledge? So the means of gaining knowledge is Pramana, and Prameya is basically the object of knowledge, about whom I am gaining that knowledge. So that is Prameya. So for us, the Prameya is the absolute truth, and absolute truth has these 5 features. Absolute truth contains all these 5: Ishvara, Jiva, Karma, Kala and Prakriti. So how can we know about this Ishvara, Jiva, Kala, Karma and Prakriti? Through which Pramana will be able to gain knowledge about them is what we are going to discuss. Okay. So different Pramanas accept by different schools of thought. Srila Damodar Goswami says that Charvaka accepts only direct perception, Pratyaksha. So whatever knowledge he says has to be gained, can be gained through Pratyaksha itself, he says. Now Kanad's Vaisheshika philosophy admits direct perception and inference. And Kapila and Patanjali accept Pratyaksha, Anuman and Shabda Pramana. Gautama, Nyaya accepts Pratyaksha, Anuman, Shabda and Upamana, comparison, he says. We will discuss all this in a bit detail, maybe next class. Jaimini's Mimamsa philosophy admits Pratyaksha, Anuman, Shabda, then Upaman and then conjecture or postulation called Arthapatti and non-cognition or Anupalabdhi. The Pauranika philosophy accepts direct perception. It's Pratyaksha, inference, Anuman, verbal testimony, Shabda, comparison, Upaman, conjecture, Arthapatti, non-cognition, Anupalabdhi, tradition, Aitihya and inclusion, Sambhava. Okay. We see, and this Pauranika philosophy means there's an ancient system based on the Puranas which is not actually prevalent now. We see all these in the conclusions found in their respective treatises. Thus, direct perception, inference, verbal testimony, comparison, conjecture, non-cognition, tradition and inclusion are the 8 kinds of evidences. Okay. So, there are 8 Pramanas which are mentioned here. Correct. Now, there is Pratyaksha and Anuman, which we already discussed, and Shabda also to some extent. Then there is Upaman, Arthapatti, Anupalabdhi, Aitihya, Sambhava. There are 10, and Jiva Goswami gives 2 more. He says there is something called as Cheshta and another one is Arsha. Okay, so there are 10 Pramanas, and in the entire creation or the way we gain knowledge only through this 10 Pramanas. So there is no 11th Pramana, there is no 12th Pramana. Pramana means only these 10. Any type of knowledge that we want to gain, whether material or spiritual, whether it's Aparavidya or Paravidya, all this knowledge can be gained only within, or these are within the scope of this 10 Pramanas only. So if we have a proper understanding of these 10 Pramanas, and then how some of these Pramanas are actually included in other Pramanas, if we have that kind of understanding, then we will be able to approach or we will be able to understand any type of subject and employ proper Pramana to understanding that particular subject. Okay, so this is just an introduction to what we have seen. I spent a little bit more time so that we have a proper understanding of what Pramana and Prameya actually means and what Pramana actually talks about. So tomorrow we will be moving at somewhat faster pace, where we will see how defining the different Pramanas, we will see how the Pramanas are defined. Okay, and we will see the pros and cons of these Pramanas. Okay, analysis means we do that also. Then after that, we see how Prataksha, only Prataksha is actually not enough. Then how inference, only inference is not enough. And then how other Pramanas are actually included in Prataksha, Anuman and Shabda. And how Prataksha and Anuman are also dependent and subservient to Shabda. So this is the analysis. So it's a brief introduction to the analysis that Srila Radha Damodar Goswami gives. We will not be spending lots of time to get into all the technical details. Actually, if we see our Acharyas, they spend a lot of time and lot of analysis and explanations are being given. We will not be doing that because this is not the focus of our study. Our focus of study is, it's specifically meant for those who are already aware of Vedic culture and how Vedanta has to be understood. So we will be doing this study as Srila Radha Damodar Goswami gives, but not in too much detail, and we'll directly jump into the second chapter and go ahead from there. So I hope it's kind of clear as to why we are studying Pramanas and Prameya and why Sri Radha Damodar Goswami mentions that here. And we will go ahead, we'll try to finish it swiftly and move on to the other aspects which will be more interesting for us. So I'll stop here. We have any questions? You can take one question maybe. Yes, bro. Yes. Instruments means, yeah. This is a classification. Yeah, the question is that we said Pramana is an instrumental cause of valid knowledge. So instruments are being used. So when we are talking about instruments, we are not talking about basically the mechanical instruments that we normally attribute the word instrument to. Instruments basically means karana. Okay, karana basically means the causes of knowledge. So when we are talking about instrumental causes of valid knowledge, see Prataksha. Now for me, Prataksha, to gain knowledge, eyes are my instrument to gain knowledge. My nose is an instrument, my ears, my mouth and my skin. These are 5 instruments for gaining Prataksha knowledge. Then Anuman, my instrument becomes my memory, my mind and my intelligence. Correct? Now for Shabda, Shabda is a different category, but for Shabda also I need my ears to hear. Correct? But Shabda is actually not Prataksha Pramana in that sense, because I am using my ears to hear Shabda, therefore Shabda is Prataksha Pramana. No, it's not like that. The instrument here is an authority who is speaking the Shabda. Okay, so the instrument there is the authority who is speaking that Shabda, he becomes my instrument for gaining valid knowledge. So similarly, other Pramanas also, they have their own instruments. So there's Upamana is there, there's Arthapati is there, Anupalabdhi, Sambhava. So Sambhava is basically Prataksha Pramana. We'll discuss what Sambhava means, but it's primarily resorting to the Prataksha Pramana. And there's Arthapati, there is Upamana. Upamana is primarily resorting to Anuman Pramana only. So we'll discuss all that. So it's basically an instrument or the valid ways in which we can gain knowledge. Correct? So it's that kind of an instrument. Prameya means? Prameya is the object of knowledge, what is to be gained, or we are getting knowledge about whom, about what. That is Prameya. What is to be known? What is to be known? That is Prameya.
And if you see that human beings are having always dissociation.
Yes.
Why Krishna is creating dissociations to the material creation, and with those dissociations, whatever we see is illusion, and with the illusion people try to research. Why the Lord is creating this?
No, Lord is not creating. Okay, Lord is creating, but the responsibility lies with us. The responsibility lies with that. The Krishna is not to be blamed here, because we wanted to have such a system. See, as living entity, as pure soul, we have perfect senses. But because we wanted to be here in this material world, there's a covering on top of us, and that covering basically limits our sensory activities. The intelligence is pure in spiritual realm, but in the material realm, the intelligence is contaminated because we desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. So he made an arrangement so that these things can be applied on top of it. The coverings can be there because we wanted it. So the desire is ours, and the manifestation is the Lord's, or the provide, or one who provides all these things. Krishna is providing it because we wanted to be separately enjoy. We want to enjoy separately from him. So because of that, we have got all these imperfect senses and other things. Imperfection of the senses is because of the body that we have got. Correct? Our eyes are imperfect because for this particular body, this is the limitation of the eye. But you see in other species of life, maybe an eagle or a vulture, he can see a very far distance. Maybe he'll be able to see 3 to 4 kilometers down where a rat is hiding, because eagle is flying very high top, correct? But then his eyes are so sharp that it can see the rat or the mouse or any fishes which are there within the water, and he can go there and pluck them and eat them. So senses are, dogs can hear, they can smell better than us. So depending upon the species of life, depending upon which yoni we have got, which form of life we have got, the senses will perform better and some senses will not perform better. But in any case, all the senses are imperfect only because we have got a material covering on top of us.
You are saying that we desire to enjoy the illusory energy,
Yeah.
the Lord is specific. But if it comes, if you see it is beginningless.
What is beginningless?
Beginningless means we never fell down from the spiritual world. We are always rotating in the material
Yeah, so these questions can be answered if you read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. So I suggest you read the entire book, you will get clarified with all these doubts, because we will not be able to get into all these details now. Correct? Please read Srila Prabhupada's books. He defines, he elaborates on all these topics in his books. So once you have a basic understanding of this philosophy, all these questions will automatically go off. So that's the suggestion. Okay. So we'll stop here. Srila Radha Damodar Goswami ki Srila